Assassin's Creed is indeed one of the most iconic video game franchises to have come out in the 7th generation of consoles. It's hard not to recognize that hooded figure who parkours over rooftops and gets a drop on baddies from above. It is one of the best-selling video game franchises of all time and has 14 games since 2007, not even counting the spin-offs? Any long-running franchise will encounter various changes over the years, but AC in particular is noted for its identity crisis since the release of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, the 11th game in the series. Despite being a decent game for what it was and garnering some positive reception by veering away from the stagnation of the franchise in the early days of the 8th generation of consoles, many longtime fans felt that Odyssey and Valhalla were no longer Assassin's Creed due to its focus on RPG mechanics and ditching various iconic aspects and traditions. But it can be said that there were deeper identity issues reflecting in its core gameplay that were there long before Origins planted the seeds of change. It's something that goes as far back as Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. We find ourselves at the dawn of Assassin's Creed Shadows, one whose name alludes to a return to working in the dark. Stealth, or rather Assassin's Creed's own brand of stealth, was something that was a strong part of its initial identity. The concept of an assassin touches on themes of being elusive and discreet. But as the series grew, it also started becoming known for its cinematic combat while undermining its unique stealth mechanics in the process, leading to this dissonance when playing as an assassin. What does it mean to be an Assassin's Creed game is a question that may have been asked even before Ezio's story was even over. Is it supposed to be a stealth action game or more of an action adventure simply featuring the ability to hide? Hello, I'm Hex, and I'm here today with another Gaming Backlog to talk about certain things that made Assassin's Creed unique. Join us as we dive in to see if the series should find its way back to the shadows that it left behind. In the original Assassin's Creed, assassins were portrayed as those with exceptional skills in espionage. They weren't just experts at navigating the city rooftops with grace, they knew how to blend in with the world around them. The first ever assassination to be witnessed by gamers was thoroughly planned. Altair makes his move as the bell rings, knowing that he can disappear into a crowd of hooded scholars when the bell rings again. Hiding in plain sight is one of the tenets of the Assassin's Creed. To be unseen and to maintain that illusion of materializing and vanishing in the environment as you accomplish your mission is one of the fantasies of the franchise. The first game put a big emphasis on utilizing social stealth to achieve your goals. Players had to pay attention to whether or not their character was keeping a high or low profile while in public, even to the point that you had to steer clear of bothersome NPCs. Infiltrating a well-guarded outpost was the exception, not the rule. Most of your objectives were out in the open, blending on benches as you eavesdrop for intel regarding your next target.
I'm telling you, it's rats.
No, it's children. I hear them laughing.
Rats or children. Either way, it's bad for business.
Pickpocketing accomplices in the middle of a crowded area for important letters, or stalking people who you could interrogate for even more information.
Tell me what he's planning.
I know only the stories I tell, nothing more.
A pity. There's no reason to let you live if you've nothing to offer in return.
Wait! There is one thing.
Continue.
You could assassinate enemies in the streets and remain undetected so long as you acted discreetly. Although they were repetitive and simple, these were very interesting gameplay concepts that made Assassin's Creed unique compared to other stealth games, being one of the few that had social stealth as a core mechanic. The theme and gameplay placed an importance of being a master of discretion. Assassin's Creed 2 improved upon a lot of these elements. Blending with crowds is much more intuitive, you could toss money to rile people up, players could hire others to assist with blending or distraction, and you could now pickpocket everyone.
Respect for art.
But these mechanics were still at a point where they were reliant on the level design, making it difficult to be consistent with an open world game. Players may not be able to utilize blending in by sitting on a bench if there were hardly any benches in the area, or if it was unlikely your target could be lured into that position. It has become a common trend for the newer settings not to have crowds that would be dense enough to use blending more consistently. Your ability to blend in became something of an afterthought in most games after AC Revelations. The settings of AC3 and Black Flag did not emphasize social stealth as much, especially when it came to dealing with enemy outposts, which encouraged players to take a more traditional approach of sticking to the rooftop, sneaking, and hiding behind bushes. Stealth is stealth, and it's still pretty in line with the creed to be able to infiltrate like a thief. but it was clear that much of the core gameplay was no longer reinforcing the Creed's philosophy of hiding in plain sight, and was now being relegated into a circumstantial gimmick. Which is quite true, even for Assassin's Creed Mirage, which was known for trying to go back to its roots with varying degrees of success. For sure, there was definitely room for improvement in the execution of these concepts. Sailing missions were infamous for their tedium and lack of engagement, but it can be argued that maybe Ubisoft should have taken more steps to not just improve, but to emphasize its unique stealth mechanics more, simply because it is in line with the Assassin's Creed and allowed the franchise to separate itself from other stealth games. Games like Hitman show that there is a ton of depth and engagement to be found in these various forms of social stealth. Of course, assassins weren't necessarily Agent 47. It's not like they were invisible all throughout. I mean, the first cinematic of AC1 involved a public assassination after Altair cut down 2 guards in broad daylight. Parkour comes into play because chases are also canonical parts of the experience. Assassin's Creed 1 also featured a lot of combat segments in the open world that rewarded players with public support that had gameplay benefits. But it does beg the question of how much indiscretion through combat is too much for a traditional assassin. Assassin's Creed is also known for its combat, but not in the same way games like Devil May Cry are known for theirs. The series boasted a very cinematic combat system that featured paired animations, which in turn made it very satisfying to watch the variety of executions your character could do. The games eventually introduced a chain kill system that allowed your assassin to execute one finisher after another. It looked insanely cool and was instrumental in giving players that power fantasy of being a one-man army killing machine. There is no denying that participating in combat, particularly in AC Brotherhood up to Black Flag, was an absolute blast. However, much of the Assassin's Creed combat systems prior to Origins were known to prioritize style over substance. While it was aesthetic peak, it was also a shallow system that was light on challenge. Games don't have to be hard, but this was too easy. This poses a problem because it ends up becoming more practical to cut your way down to your assassination target than to be compelled to hide in plain sight, unless a linear mission specifically triggers a desynchronization upon detection. It was a lack of balance concerning the game's various mechanics, making stealth less of a practical option despite what the narrative implies. Nothing is true, everything is permitted are the guiding words of the Assassin's Creed. Many assassins learn at the end of their story arcs that the true meaning of this maxim lies in wisdom, that because everything is permitted, we must expect to live with the consequences of our actions. The assassins fight for freedom, but to be free is inseparable from responsibility. But from a game design perspective, players never feel the full weight of this whenever they go on a murder spree in the game's open world. There isn't much of a consequence to it. This is especially concerning given how another tenet of the Creed is to never compromise the Brotherhood. I'm pretty sure taking down a small army within minutes is one way to get a lot of heat on the assassins. But getting that notoriety meter up wasn't especially punishing even when Templars could attempt to reclaim territory in some of the games. Sometimes the notoriety system even encourages us to keep it up, just so we can enjoy more of the combat rather than to respect the violence and its consequences, which could have led to players being motivated to keep up discretion in the open world. Of course, there were installments where you weren't tied to the Brotherhood for a large part of the game. Entries like Black Flag prioritized combat because the premise and design deliberately veered away from the assassin's identity introduced in the original, which is why we often hear people call some of them good games but not good Assassin's Creed games. The franchise could have done a great deal more for the Brotherhood system, which involved managing assassin recruits. It could have been a great way to create accountability when playing as someone overpowered. Sure, Ezio can killstreak his way to an objective, leaving a trail of dead soldiers in his wake. But what if that endangers those in the Brotherhood? And would also have mechanical consequences such as less access to gear because military presence has been increased in the entire district. Later Metal Gear Solid games did something like this. Performing efficiently with minimal kills and detection increases the morale of your organization while also attracting better volunteers. You'll also be denied good recruits if you go in guns blazing, which stunts the growth of your army, leading to less tactical options and gear development. The Brotherhood systems, and by extent Syndicate's gang system, had a lot of potential to complement and encourage being consistent in discretion, and to stay true to the Assassin's Creed, while not necessarily removing your combat prowess. I won't deny that Assassin's Creed's combat in the early days was fun. But depth matters if you want to create an overall engaging product, which leads to even more fun in the long run. Sometimes that means putting a more extrinsic challenge and motivations to the player. The killstreak system, while visually awesome, removed the need to utilize other abilities. Certain games allowed you to disarm, dodge, counter kills with tools, and use heavy attacks. But outside of intrinsic motivation, there was no need to do so if they could go down at the press of a button. I won't say AC Syndicate's combat system was difficult or better, but being rewarded with a cinematic multi-kill for lining up multiple opponents to a near-death state was an improvement over just breezing through guards with killstreaks. Some will argue that the games are easy because the assassin was canonically that good. However, powerful protagonists like Dante, Kratos, and Shadow of Mordor's Talion still provided more depth in comparison despite being outrageously OP. Depth and flashiness aren't mutually exclusive, and it's something that the RPG entries have shown. The best stealth games obviously made good justifications for remaining unseen. Oftentimes, you were too weak for combat. The Last of Us emphasized the need to conserve very limited resources. Dishonored featured narrative consequences for your actions. Metal Gear Solid and Hitman just made combat futile and janky in their earlier titles and made it clear that stealth was going to be more fun to do. AC Unity and Mirage were in a somewhat good direction at making combat more challenging, and would at times make stealth a much more viable approach when you find yourself under-leveled. At least during specific moments when Unity wasn't being janky. Mirage has its share of issues, but it did feel like a step back into the right direction. I mean, the point of the game was to try after all. And with that refocus on stealth gives us more hope for Assassin's Creed Shadows. A lot of Naoa's gameplay seems to be a refinement to Basim's stealth in Mirage. It is unsurprising that there is a renewed focus on stealth, because while assassins haven't been consistent in working in the dark, playing as a shinobi is more likely to support such an approach. What does seem appealing to this entry is the dual protagonist system, primarily due to how it allocates a big chunk of the combat and stealth to separate characters. There will always be people that would want combat to be in Assassin's Creed. Sometimes catering to that demand came at the expense of solid stealth design. However, this is a great compromise. By allocating much of its combat design to Yasuke, it would help in bringing Naoa's stealth gameplay to a greater potential. It's a nice way to balance out both experiences. This is something they should have had in Syndicate, instead of making the Fry twins play almost the same. Of course, this all depends on Naoa's combat. From the preview, Naoa is more suited to stealth. But if her combat abilities reach a point that undermines the stealth shinobi assassin gameplay, then we might find ourselves back to square one. Then again, the idea of being OP in combat as a reward for a long and stealthy playthrough does sound kinda neat. As opposed to games like AC3, where you could do kill streaks the second you're let loose in the open world. Of course, Shadow's lack of social stealth means that it's likely not going to match AC Mirage when trying to go back to its roots. It's also likely to continue AC Odyssey and Valhalla's trend of playing as a warrior fitting of that era than a traditional assassin like Altair and Arno. It just so happens that being a ninja is close to being an assassin. But hey, at least Hidden Blade combat is back. When you think about it, Assassin's Creed had everything you needed to be the coolest game ever. It had unique stealth mechanics, cinematic combat, and parkour, all the while playing as a hooded badass in a vastly detailed open world. Its premise of looking into history puts infinite potential to create relevant and powerful stories. But it suffered due to flawed executions of its ideas and its tendency to change into something new rather than to improve its cool ideas. At the end of the day, we all want good games. Sometimes a good game knows where to focus its themes, and the best ones know what they are and put effort into executing what they do best. Stealth isn't the most popular game mechanic out there, and one would argue that action has a more general and wide-reaching appeal. But we also have to remember that adage of appealing to everyone is appealing to no one. Even after 18 years, we still believe in the vision of the original Assassin's Creed, and the idea that it can be improved to be something greater than any AC game released thus far. Assassin's Creed Mirage and Assassin's Creed Shadows may not be big steps as far as stealth is concerned, but at least it's a step in the right direction. And if Resident Evil has taught us anything when it comes to both mass appeal and staying true to your roots, it's that it can be done. And that's that. What about you guys? What path do you want Assassin's Creed to take? Let us know in the comments. If you want to hear us talk more about video games, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Again, I'm Hex, and see y'all next time.